Hello everyone, my name is Elianne Rodriguez and today I'll be presenting on my project Demographic Predictors of Academic Success, done by myself and my mentor Dr. Martin Haysacker through the Life Satisfaction Excellence Lab at the University of Florida. Background information. When we look at academic success, we must first consider the fact that coping and social support have both been proven by prior literature to be important predictors of academic success. Problem-focused and adaptive coping has been linked to higher GPAs, and perceived social support leads to more academic success and more general well-being. This, however, has been done across all college campuses, therefore including the full range of undergrad students, and white students are the majority of undergrads, therefore making this data a bit more skewed towards that type of population and not taking into account the idiosyncrasies that minority students might be facing. Latinx students and Black students make up 22% and 14% respectively of the undergrad population, therefore making them minorities within these college campuses. There are also first-generation students and immigrant students to consider. First-generation students, which are students whose parents did not attend college, 56% of these identify as Hispanic Latinx, and 20% of undergrad students are immigrants or children of immigrants, making them, although they are minorities, a large and important percentage of the undergrad population. As a first-generation immigrant Hispanic woman, I definitely relate to these statistics, and I can attest to the fact that it is difficult as a minority on a college campus. And these minorities also deal with a lot of acculturative stress. Acculturative stress is defined as the stress of being in a culture that's not your own, and it has been linked to negative affect, depressive symptoms, and other effects. Acculturative stress, however, has been found to have a moderation effect of adaptive coping strategies and social support, meaning that having adaptive coping and social support lessens acculturative stress and therefore lessens the symptoms associated with acculturative stress. But we must understand that these minority students experience this and it may affect their GPAs and academic success. And I also noticed in the literature there is a hole in which we don't look at the adaptation to college that these students may be facing, and that might also be influencing in this academic success. Which led me to my question: how do first-generation students, students from immigrant families, and Hispanic Latinx students relate to acculturative stress, rational coping, social provisions, adaptation to college, and academic success? These 5 independent variables at the bottom will be referred to as academic outcomes from here on out. This was my design with the independent variables right at the top. First generation and immigrant families split into 2. First generation between parents attending college and parents completing college, and immigrant families with parents born outside of the US and students born outside of the US. And at the bottom, we have our 5 dependent variables, again referred to as our academic outcomes. So our hypotheses. My 5 hypotheses were that students whose parents did not attend college, students whose parents did not complete college, students whose parents were not born in the United States, students born outside of the United States, and Hispanic and Latinx students would have worse academic outcomes. Worse academic outcomes being defined as more acculturative stress, less rational coping, less social provisions, less adaptation to college, and lower GPAs. The procedure used in this study was that psychology instructors and campus cultural organizations were both contacted via email, asked for their participation in this survey. Once they agreed to do so, they were sent the Qualtrics link, which they then distributed to their students. The participants completed a Qualtrics survey with 4 measures and demographic information that took approximately 10 minutes to complete, and those who were receiving extra credits via their professors were sent a separate survey which was not connected to their original results. The participants, we had a total of 321 participants, mostly female and white, but a Hispanic Latinx population of 30% in our participant pool. First generation students, most participants were not first generation, and their parents had attended college and completed college. For immigrant families, most of the participants' parents were born in the US, and only about 15.8% of participants were born outside of the US. Those who did not know their parents' background information were excluded from our analysis. The measures used in this study were the modified SAFE scale for acculturative stress. A sample item is many people have stereotypes about my culture or ethnic group and treat me as if they were true. The social provision scale A sample item being, I have close relationships that provide me with a sense of emotional security and well-being. The rational coping subset of the coping strategies questionnaire, sample item being, work out a plan for dealing with what has happened, and the college adaptation scale for adaptation to college. Sample item, I find life as a student very pleasant. For our data analysis, hypotheses 1, 2, and 3 were tested using a one-way ANOVA, and planned contrasts were included, in which we predicted that conditions where neither parent attended or completed college and where neither parent was born in the US would have the biggest effects. And hypotheses 4 and 5 were analyzed using 5 independent samples t-tests. For our results, we found that for first-generation students in both parents attend and parents completing college, acculturative stress and GPA were statistically significant. For acculturative stress, neither parent attending college and neither parent completing college had the highest levels of acculturative stress. And for GPA, when both parents attended college and both parents completed college, this also had the highest GPA. This was an unexpected contrast in our results. Similarly, for immigrant families, acculturative stress was significant across both of these conditions, and when both parents were born outside of the US, these students had the highest acculturative stress, and students born outside of the US had higher acculturative stress. And for Hispanic Latinx students, it was significant across both acculturative stress and GPA. Hispanic Latinx students had higher levels of acculturative stress and lower GPAs compared to their non-Hispanic Latinx peers. Here we see the parents' complete college condition, 2 charts in which we see that the neither completed condition and acculturative stress has the highest acculturative stress, and the GPA is highest when both parents completed college. Similarly, for Hispanic Latinx students had higher acculturative stress, as shown in the top graph, and lower GPAs, as shown in the bottom graph. So for a summary of our results, acculturative stress was significant across all conditions, but it was highest in participants whose parents were not born in the US, for participants not born in the US, and for Hispanic Latinx participants. Academic success was significantly lower for participants whose parents did not attend college, whose parents did not complete college, and students who identified as Hispanic Latinx. Social support, rational coping, and adaptation to college did not have any significant results in these analyses. In the limitations for the study, a convenience sample was used, and therefore we found a restriction of range within our GPA with about 2.9 as a minimum and 4.0 as a maximum. That means that this sample was relatively high achieving in terms of academics and may not be representative of all first-generation immigrant and Hispanic Latinx students. It is also worth noting that the correlational nature of this study really bars any causal conclusions, because we can't claim that acculturative stress led to lower academic success. We can only say that these things were related. These results bring up a lot of possible implications in terms of programs. We could create new college readiness programs and implement culturally competent tutoring services for college readiness programs. This would just help these students from a young age be prepared for college and be prepared for this new environment and this new culture. And culturally competent tutoring services would just train these tutors to ensure that they know that these students are going through a lot of acculturative stress, and therefore how they can help them not only deal with that along with their classes. Future research could analyze the efficacy of these programs, as well as discovering other potential variables, other potential relationships between the variables discussed, and possibly understanding why the variables that we included were not significant, as well as studying these variables' intersectionality to see if the effects are greater. For instance, are first-generation students who are also immigrants going to have more acculturative stress than just a first-generation student? And finally, I would like to give a big thank you to my mentor, Dr. Martin Haysacker, for all of his support and guidance, to my McNair director, Dr. Sanisha Barnes, for all of her knowledge and endless support in these past couple of months, and to my family for always being there and their unconditional love. These are my references. Thank you all for listening.